Welcome to the Bank Marketing Show, the podcast that engages and informs you for success in today's marketplace. It's the show that will make you a better marketer with trends, tactics, and inspiration from experts and industry leaders. If you're wanting to impact your personal success and position your bank as the best choice in your market, you're in the right place. Now let's dive into today's show with your hosts, Chris and Dan.
All right. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Bank Marketing Show. We're glad to have you with us. We appreciate you guys as listeners and are so glad that this show is continuing to grow and expand and lots more folks subscribing, downloading, all of that. So if you haven't done that, jump in and subscribe. And a good reason to do that is because of the kind of topic that we're going to have today, which is, Dan, I think, highly useful for everybody. So welcome, Dan.
Thank you. I'm excited. This has been around a while this year, and I'm excited to be getting to it and exploring this stuff. So,
yeah. Well, and so what we're going to dive into today in talking about AI, more specifically generative AI, and I know even when we say that, for some of our listeners, it instantly induces fear, and chill bumps, and oh my gosh, what is this? And yes, it's a buzzword, it's a buzz topic with what's happening. And I heard this described well recently. This is kind of like in the late 80s, early 90s discussion of the internet. So this is not a discussion of if AI and integration and the utilization of it in our financial institutions and in our industry. It's not if it's coming. This is a discussion of, again, it's kind of like the internet. It's coming and it's going to continue to grow and expand and be utilized. So I think a lot of our discussion today for our listeners, Dan, is around what is this going to look like? How do we tread into it?
I think that's a great metaphor. It's here. Back in the early days of the internet, the early days of the computer, I think the adoption pace was relatively slow to what we're going to see with AI, right? It's here, right? Nobody was talking about AI last year, but suddenly the early part of 2023, ChatGPT comes on the scene and it's all over the place really quickly. And I look at that and I think, well, ChatGPT does some cool stuff, but really what's going to be interesting is in a year or two, right? It's going to do even more. And It already does a lot more now than it did the beginning of the year. And it's coming. So, I think the difference with the internet metaphor is that I think this is going to happen quicker. It's already integrated everywhere. Every tool is trying to have some kind of generative AI, add-on. My email system now, has generative AI built in. So if you don't actually want to write your full email, it'll give you, give you prompts and give you ideas. It's here, right? It's going to keep getting more advanced, but it's here. So I think it's something that as a community banker, you need, it's not just be aware of and kind of watch it. It's already here. Start using it and figure out where you can and where you can't use it. So that's really where I think we're going to talk today is that where it's going to be useful, where it's not, what it is, what it isn't.
There you go. Well, so Dan, let's start with that. Let's define a bit more specifically for our listeners, traditional AI versus generative AI. What's a good way to explain that?
Yeah, I mean, AI, and you may hear artificial intelligence or machine learning, ML, AI and ML have been around a long time. I took ML classes when I was an undergrad, several years ago. And it's been around, right? And the concept is pretty simple. You build a computer software that, very loosely operates like a human brain might, and you feed it inputs and you give it data, and it learns to recognize patterns, and it learns to You kind of training it to recognize patterns out of things. You can feed it, 1 million, let's say, images, and you can train it to learn to recognize an image of a dog, right? So that's kind of traditional. The generative AI stuff is more of like, you tell it, you feed it 1 million pictures of a dog, and you say, now create a new dog. And generative AI will then create the picture of a dog, and the same thing with text and things like that. So generative AI is just much more about you're training it, but then it goes a step beyond and actually creates new data, assimilates the information together, and creates a new output, more answering questions than recognizing patterns. And more at the early days of the generative AI stuff. So today you might go to like the image generating tools out there, and the images just look weird.
Yeah.
I did this thing a few months ago, wrote a blog about it, and I said I had it generate an image of a person walking into a bank, but like the image it generated looked like a bank in a big city. The person's like reaching for the doorknob, but they just had like two eyes, and they didn't have the bottom of a face. So like it's not quite there yet, but it's getting there.
Yeah.
And it's just going to keep getting better and better. But that's kind of like we're on the precipice of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's I guess the big deal about generative is that it creates new, that it is creative.
Yeah.
It creates new data or text or images, as you say, those types of things. And that's this next wave or generation of where it's going. And so, yeah, that's a big deal. And that's the part that all the conversations that I'm hearing these days, Dan, are about, well, number one, that's scary, and that starts to get into stuff that kind of makes your spine stand up straight and go, so, what is this going to evolve into? And while that's a whole other set of discussions, I think a lot of what we wanted to cover today is how is this applicable to financial institutions, and how can you start using it, taking advantage of it, and then in the good versus evil discussion, it's utilizing it for good. To be,
right.
What can this be for your current customers? What can it be in appeal to other consumers or small businesses or whatever the case may be? And also, what is it going to mean to us internally? How can it positively affect our operations and our efficiencies and all of those things? And I think the answer there, Dan, is it's going to play into all of those categories: current customers and communications, and their experience with us as an institution, and appeal to consumers, and everything that marketing means. And I know we're going to discuss that here in a moment as well. And then what it means internally for functionalities. Again, kind of going back to that earlier analogy of going from paper to spreadsheets on computers. I mean, that you were right. That was a slower evolution, but we're looking at that one in the rearview mirror and kind of all chuckle at that. But those that were sitting in the middle of that going, wait a minute, we're going to get rid of all this paper and put all of our data and function our financial institution based on spreadsheets that are in computers. And that seemed, massive, foreign, non-trusting, all of those things. And I mean, does anyone question that now and the utilization and the formulation of all of our data, in software systems? Obviously not just spreadsheets.
Right.
So I think that's, we're in the early days of that exact same discussion. And, that's where it's going. And it's huge, it's powerful. And as you mentioned, it's going to continue to, so to speak, grow, learn from itself, and become more valuable. So that, at some point in the near future, that image that you were getting it to generate is not going to be missing some pieces or whatever. It's going to be really dynamic. And the same thing with information and text.
That's what I think about. Like, to me, I mean, coming from like a tech background, like it's what it does today is really impressive. But I generally have I'm not I'm not an AI like programmer, but like I get kind of get what's going on and how it's doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, what the output that like say ChatGPT does today is it's impressive, but really what it's doing is looking out at the internet. It's looking at what it does in a few seconds is it looks at, a million web pages or a million images on what your prompt is to it. And it assimilates that information and kind of answers your question. It's pretty impressive, but what's scary is what it's going to be able to do in a couple of years, right? When that image of the person walking into the bank isn't missing the bottom half of their face, right? Is indistinguishable from a regular photograph, and it'll get there, and so we just have to like recognize that it's going in that direction. So what can we be doing now to learn how we use it to make what we're doing better because of it, and not be scared of it, but kind of join. If you can't beat it, join it.
Yeah. Well, so Dan, before we dive too far into how banks and those of us in the industry can start using it now, kind of walk before you run, and what does it look like to crawl, walk, and run? And we're going to go into that a little bit more here in a minute. But before we do, I want to go back to something that you've said a couple of times already, and that is it's about what you put into it or ask of it. So let's talk about that for a second. Before we started today, you were giving the example of telling it to create a LinkedIn post.
Yeah.
So talk about that for a second, because it's
No, I mean, I think if you go to ChatGPT or one of these tools today, and they're even if you're using like a social media planning tool, they built generative AI in, but they all essentially work the same way.
Mm-hmm.
Like you'd say, pretend you're a loan officer, and write me a LinkedIn post, or pretend you're a bank president and write a LinkedIn post about, the interest rate market. It's going to go out and it's going to read 100,000 articles about, the changing interest rates. And then, it's going to go read, thousands and thousands of LinkedIn posts that talk about those things. And it's going to kind of take the average of all of them. And it's going to spit something out that sounds really good, right? It's going to be full sentences. It's going to sound like a really good LinkedIn post. But then the reality of it is that like, it's the average of everything that's already out there. So it's not for you to put that on your LinkedIn. It's not terribly differentiated.
Yeah.
And I think that's the point where it is today. It looks really good, but it's like, you got to think about it as it's the average of everything that's already out there.
Yeah.
You've got to then kind of take it and make it your own.
Well, so the other human and brand and marketing element of that, Dan, is what on this podcast we talk about over and over and over again, and that is what's your differentiator? What's your all banks sell money. So we have a checking account. We offer mortgages. Really? Okay. So what
and if you ask it to write the LinkedIn post, it's just going to say, our checking accounts are the best checking accounts. But
right. There you go.
It's not human. It's not differentiated.
Yeah. So digging into that to this point, it's about what we as the human ask it specifically to do. And if we input information that is around what our superpower is as a brand, well, now you're going to get somewhere. Now you're going to start riding a horse that's going to give you something that is more about who you actually are. Whatever that may be, makes no difference. If you're an ag bank, if you're a small business focused bank, if you're a community revitalization bank, if you're whatever it is that you are, is fine. So it has to start with the human perspective of maybe not just give me a LinkedIn post about that we offer a checking account, but get really specific about that. So then maybe it's helping to accelerate what it is that you already know and are trying to create from a content perspective, correct?
Yeah. Yeah. I think the way I think about using it is more of the way you would use Google, right? Versus the way you would just write that LinkedIn post or write the article,
mm-hmm.
right? So if you go to Google today, I mean, the one of the issues with Google today is that like that traditional model of search, right? Where, I mean, when Google started, right, hopefully we all remember the days of like, early web pages used to just have these big blocks of text at the bottom where they'd throw all the keywords in, because that was the main driver of your Google ranking. That's not really the way Google works today, but you can think about it in the same way. Like if your web page is talking a lot about checking accounts, like Google might rank it highly. But as a bank marketer, right, if you're trying to like look at ways you can humanize your bank, right? Hey, we've got our mission. I'm going to go out and look at other banks. I'm going to go do some research of, brand differentiation and humanizing my bank. But you go to Google and you type in, best ways to humanize my bank. I'm making this up on the spot, obviously, but like you type something like that into Google, and then you're going to get, 20 marketing agencies, 20 big software companies that have written that article because they know it can get them ranked. And so it's not, that article might have some useful information in it, but you're not going to like figure out how to humanize your bank from a Salesforce article. No offense to Salesforce. Like they put out great content. HubSpot puts out fantastic content, but it's designed to rank on Google, not designed to necessarily like be the be all end all. And the same way with like I was saying with ChatGPT, if you just take that information in those articles verbatim, it's going to end up not being very differentiated because a lot of banks are using that. What ChatGPT will do, is if you ask it the same question of like, write me a tagline or write me a mission statement, that's differentiated and human, it's going to go read all those articles from Salesforce and HubSpot and all the other places and assimilate that information and try to come out with something. And so what it can do in that case, like it's going to save you the time of reading all those articles. It's going to kind of get you past that Google research phase and, get you a little further down the line, but it's not going to, you can't just like lift what it does and use it. You still got to make it your own, but you can use it to sort of shortcut that stuff. Mm-hmm. So I think like, I started talking about like, I find it a lot more useful to use it just to kind of replace search for those types of research projects. If you're looking for a new ways to do things, it's a great idea generator, but I take the results that I get from it and kind of yes and them, right? Like this sounds good, but also let's add this to it or let's change it around this way. And then it becomes differentiated.
Well, and one great tip that I have heard from folks who are much farther along than I am in utilization of AI, it is to, whether it's image or text or whatever the case may be, is to ask two different ways. Okay, so ask it for output two totally different ways, and in doing so, you can begin to learn. Okay, I'm the manipulator of what is an extremely powerful tool, but again, dependent on how you ask or what the information that you provide alongside or the positioning of yourself. Mm-hmm. I am a marketer, create a blog that does this, from my position versus I am a consumer and want to know more information about student checking accounts. And, you ask that two different ways and you're going to get significantly different output, right?
Yeah. Well, and you've made the point a few times here, like, as marketers, as bank marketers, right? It's not our job shouldn't be our job to like say we have the best checking accounts. Come get our checking account. You want to talk about what you've got in terms of what the customer needs, what's relevant to that particular customer. They're not looking for a checking account. It's like the old metaphor of sell me this pen. Mm-hmm. It's not about the ink in the pen. It's about the love letter you're going to write with the pen and what that will do for your life. Same way here. Like if you ask it, say, I'm a bank and I need to write a checking account ad. It's going to talk about the best checking account. It's going to talk about like the ink, as it were. But if you say, I'm a consumer, I'm a customer, I'm looking to buy my first home, tell me what I need to be looking for. Tell me the process. Tell me what I should be looking for out of my bank, out of a mortgage, out of a banker relationship. And right, it can help you get into that consumer mindset. That's really hard to do. You sit in a bank all day long, and even if you work with customers a lot, you're still thinking about it from your perspective. But it can help you. It can help you get into that mindset.
Yeah, and what you're talking about is segmentation. Again, it's as simple as segmentation. So tip number one is about what we input is utilizing in the perspective of your differentiators. And number two is segmentation of who specifically is it that you're trying to appeal to. Is it first-time home buyers? Is it someone ready to start their first business? Is it, whatever the case may be. So it's determining those and inputting that. And Dan, to move forward to kind of the next step in our conversation today, as you've used ChatGPT and some of the others as examples too. But let's talk a little further too about other utilizations as a financial institution and what this either current day, or you better get on the bandwagon here pretty quick about other ways that AI is going to be utilized and thinking about what some of those are. And for example, one of those that we've talked about too is partnering your CRM with AI and AI tools. And that starts to get into speaking to segmented audiences and those types of things. So some thoughts around that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's this. I think with the technologies that are out there, right? There's a lot of data and analytics platforms, right? That you can ask a lot of questions to. You can get some really good insights. You can kind of, use those as inputs to your strategic process. On the other hand, there's CRMs that, you're tracking customer conversations. You can make, queues of customers to contact based on data and insights, but you're doing those integrations. You've got to build those integrations. AI, can add a really interesting level to that of don't just like tell me who to contact based on my understanding of the data or what I've told the analytics tool to look at, but actually like assimilate all that stuff and say like, what does this customer need? Can we, can we take the data? Can the AI look at the data and kind of anticipate what the customer needs? Right? Look at, hey, this customer X bought or applied for a mortgage. Here's what was going on in their account for the 90 days prior to that, or the 30 days prior to that, whatever it is. Now let's look at all of your other customers and say, does anyone exhibit those similar patterns but hasn't applied for a mortgage yet? Right? Can we then call them, get a message, get ads out to them in some format? We think you might be getting ready to apply for a mortgage. Do it with us. I think that's where the CRMs can help with a lot of process stuff. The analytics tools can help with, maybe find those customers, but that's one use case. There's a couple hundred of them. So AI can help you do all those things at once, like anticipate those customer needs in real time. A customer walks into the bank, a teller could open up their account and it will tell them, talk to this customer about X, right? Mm-hmm. Here's where they are in their life, and here's something you could bring up to them.
Well, and you briefly mentioned it, but that's a huge piece of where AI is going, is that what you just described happens in real time. Yeah. It's not necessarily analyzing the data a month later and going, oh, let's do a direct mail piece to these people. No, this is stuff happening in real time. I like your teller example, but another big one is we're all familiar at one level or another with chatbots. Well, that's a great example of AI that is moving in the direction of those real-time conversations that are doing what you just said, which is anticipating customer needs. And I've heard examples like, a customer engaging with a chatbot on one of your platforms, and the AI is recognizing that the pain point that customer is trying to address is about their credit card fees or balances or something like that, and can actually suggest another product that's within your financial institution portfolio that may serve them better.
Right.
And so now, again, back to the beginning of our conversation today, now you're talking about utilization of AI for good, for purposes of actually being helpful and being proactive. And now, Dan, the what we're talking about is doing that in real time and in conversation that the customer actually benefits from.
Yeah.
And another huge piece of this is that as the customer, and if I'm engaging with my bank and it actually just made this suggestion, man, that's as good as knowing, Susie or Bob that works down at the bank in some ways that is going to make that same suggestion. Hey, Chris, this is happening with your credit card balances. Have you ever looked at kind of doing it this way with management of your money? And man, that makes me feel good. You just gave me an answer.
It's not just saying you don't have a credit card with us. Here are our 6 credit cards. It's saying based on your current spending, here's the option, and this is going to save you X dollars, right?
Yeah.
You're paying this much in fees, and you're paying this much in interest, and we've got this other product that's, a couple percentage points less interest, and that's going to save you this over time. Do you want to apply for it? And anticipating that and looking ahead. And, maybe at some point you still need to call Susie or Jim, but it can get you further down that road. And some customers don't want to call and talk to somebody, right? They'd rather interface with the chatbot.
Sure.
It seems, antithetical to like the way a lot of community banks operate. But as most community banks are trying to appeal to younger customers, that's things like I'm not that young anymore, but I don't want to talk to people unless I have to. Like I will call and solve. Sometimes you have a problem and you have to call and solve it. But if I'm just exploring stuff, I don't want to get into a conversation because then you get the hard sell, and then you get phone calls every day for a couple of weeks. I'd rather, do as much research as I can first, and then, call if I need to. And so if you're a bank that if you're not adopting these types of tools, I'm going to have that conversation with the bank that is.
That's right.
And, you're missing out on those conversations.
That's exactly right. And this also rolls, Dan, into kind of the next level, because part of what we've talked about here for the last several minutes is you've mentioned people in numerous different positions. So it's the consumer and all that, but it's who's putting that information in and running the chatbot on behalf of the bank. And who's monitoring that and all that. But then you talked about teller, you talked about loan officer, you talked about calling to follow up. You talked about all of these things. So there are numerous touch points, because one of the big fears around AI is, it's going to replace my job.
Yeah.
Well, again, back to the age old, from all of those years ago, is the person that was handling data by paper. If that was also the person that started to learn how to use spreadsheets on a PC, then that same person, then not only did they preserve their job, what they actually did was learned the utilization of a new tool that exponentially sped up processes, accuracy, everything else for management of data. They're not having to go, have a rooms full of file cabinets. They have a computer sitting in front of them that does the same thing, multifold faster, all that, right? So that's that, 30-year-old example. But now we're talking about doing this for AI too. So the encouragement, I think, around AI for people in financial institutions is if you sit there and you're scared that AI is going to take your job and you continue to sit there, you know what? It might.
Yeah.
However, if you start today with going, how can I and us as a financial institution utilize all these things that AI is doing now? As you say, it's not coming, Dan. It's here. And what's going to happen over the next 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, and how can we utilize this to serve better, organize data better, and anticipate customer needs in real time, and improve our internal efficiencies? Man, you're really onto something. And if you're sitting in that chair and you're the person that's learning to utilize that, you're going to catapult your bank forward and your own position.
It's going to help you do more with less, right? If you utilize it, it's going to help you do more with less. And what better story to go to your boss and say, I'm doing the work of 4 people, or maybe not 4 people, that's maybe extreme, but I'm doing the work of more, I'm doing more work than I'm more productive. I'm outputting more than I ever did because I'm using AI, because I'm using these tools. And now we're doing all these things that the bank was never doing before. And hey, you didn't have to hire anybody.
Yeah. And Dan, we've gotten a lot of feedback over the last couple of years of this podcast. And we know that a lot of our listeners are C-suite and exec level folks also that are really trying to keep their ear to the ground about what's happening and what's coming and what's going on in the industry. So if I'm that individual and a community bank or financial institution CEO or president or COO or whatever the case may be, and listening to this, my wheels are turning going, okay, we need to get a team, of folks that part of their new role is looking at how in their department, how are we going to utilize AI, and how are we going to utilize it for the good and for the moving forward so that we're positioning our bank to be what you described in your scenario as the one to go to because the guys down the street are not doing it yet.
Right.
That sounds like smart administration to me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No. And I think the thing is that it's here. It's advancing. We talked about at the beginning, the adoption of the internet, the adoption of the PC took several years. This is going to happen much faster. So if you're not starting to use this stuff now, you're gonna get far behind a lot faster. You're gonna have a lot more catching up to do if you're not starting to experiment, starting to figure out what it can do for you. Yeah. Right. So, you're gonna get really far behind in a year or two, not 10, 20 years from now.
That's right. And for marketers, and from the marketing perspective, it's about efficiencies of message, streamlining, and efficiency in being able to reduce noise to better serve a consumer that is actually having a pain point that needs to be addressed or has a need that maybe they don't even know that they need. And being solution providers and proactive about that. And that's so much of what marketing is going to become with AI, I think, Dan, and it's about dialogue with consumers that's two-way rather than just posting information about our brand out there.
Right.
And waiting for people to come running to that. It's really not going to be about that anymore in marketing, I don't think.
Right. It's going to be, relevancy, timeliness, and the products are the secondary thing. As a bank, do you understand my needs? Can you help me solve my problems? Well, great. I know you have a checking account. I know you have loans, but I want to know that you understand me and that you can help me. Because if it's just checking accounts, I need to know that I need a checking account. I need to know that I need that particular loan or the wealth management solution. But consumers are going to start to kind of expect that you're, anticipating this. I think there's some, I don't have the stat in front of me, but there's lots of stats around, like 60, 70% of consumers want to work with brands and companies that anticipate their needs. And just like, Amazon recommending products to you, like that's gonna spread across the industry, but it's not gonna be in, financial services, it's not gonna be products necessarily. It's gonna be, how do we help you meet your savings goals? How do we help you meet your dream house? Buy your dream house, like those types of things.
Yeah. And again, the conversations now are professionals that are scared of this or think this is future tense. Another example of it is a very basic AI is social media algorithms serving ads to particular audiences, right? So I before my trip last summer, I bought some fly fishing gear Well, what do you think happens on my social media feeds as I start getting ads from other fly fishing gear providers and all that other kind of stuff? Well, that's very basic AI. So anybody that's sitting here listening to this podcast going, I know this AI stuff is coming. It's like, bud, we're swimming in it all day, every day already, and don't even realize it at a surface level. So those that are going to capture the opportunities that are in front of us and use them for good to be proactive and be conversational and even be able to serve well are the ones I think that are going to get ahead in this. Well, Dan, I know prior to our episode today, we had pulled some different resources for folks and some great informational pieces and articles, I think, that we were talking about putting in our show notes as well.
Yeah, got some really interesting articles from Financial Brand, from McKinsey, from a McKinsey study, an Accenture study. So if you're, if this has been useful, if you're interested in these topics, like we'll link those out in the show notes. And we're not affiliated with any of those organizations, but they put out a lot of great content on this stuff, and worth kind of, there's the practical aspect of it of like use ChatGPT, put some prompts in there, get a sense of what it does, do stuff from your bank's perspective, from the customer's perspective, and then there's like the research, the reporting around the topics that can help you wrap your head more around, what this means, 5 years down the line for the banking industry.
Yeah. Well, Dan, one of the quotes that I had actually saved in our notes, and again, we'll put it in our show notes, that I wanted to leave as a thought for everyone today, is a guy named Kevin Farley wrote this for the Financial Brand, and we'll give full credit in our show notes too. And his quote was this: "The failure to leverage the immense potential of generative AI in your marketing strategy isn't just an oversight. It's a regret that AI will be happy to tell you about later." Yeah. So let that roll around in your melon for a little while and kind of go, okay. So it's get on the horse and figure out how to do it and do it well. That's applicable for us as marketers and our agencies, Dan, and is certainly applicable for everyone working in financial institutions.
Yeah. So go out and experiment today.
There you go. Yeah. And lastly, I want to invite folks to connect with Dan and I as well, because we're not the industry leading experts in AI, but we're certainly trying to work in that direction and pay attention to it, and we're happy to have conversations. And this is I think a topic, Dan, that a lot of folks don't know where to go to ask people. So I wanted to invite folks to go to bankmarketingshow.com, to our website, and there you can email and reach out to either of us individually or us collectively, and have these conversations. We're happy to help.
Yeah, definitely.
Great. Well, man, enjoyed it. I knew this would be an engaging one.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna go keep reading on this stuff, and got my brain going. So appreciate the conversation. This is great. I think hopefully we've inspired some of you listening to wrap your heads around it more and see what it can do, what it can do in your job and your bank. Because I think it's all good stuff if we start experimenting now, use it the right way.
There you go. Well, great. Dan, enjoy doing it with you today. I know we've got some great guests lined up for some of our upcoming episodes as well. So looking forward to those, and appreciate you very much.
Yeah. Thanks, Chris. Talk to you soon.
Take care.
Thanks for joining us. To go deeper or get access to some of the valuable nuggets from today's show, go to bankmarketingshow.com. There you'll find episodes, links to resources, and much more. Be sure to subscribe wherever you find your podcasts. And join us next time.